Before I dive into my topic, I would like to ask you all a question. You can answer it in your head. Have you ever experienced or created a space that is truly inclusive of transgender people? Most of us, including me, didn't think it was necessary. The reason I'm here today and the reason that I start with that question is because I want to tell you a story. A story about myself and a story that is way bigger and beyond me. A story that I hope will turn your eyes and ears to listen to my trans siblings. I'm Teenasai Balamu, a queer, non-binary trans musician. I'm originally from Bangalore, but I'm currently based out of London. I play and release independent music under the artist name GrapeGuitarBox. I was assigned female at birth, and by that I mean that I spent large part of my life being perceived as a girl and eventually as a woman by society, and therefore treated accordingly. I want to unpack what I just said in my previous sentence and go into understanding the concept of gender. Gender is a social construct. Now, this is, I'm sure all of us have heard the statement so many times, but we can try and understand it a bit more, I feel. It's just a bunch of roles and performances that have been assigned to the people based on their genitals and what the society thinks that they should be doing. For centuries, it has been taken for granted that the genitals you're born with will also determine what you can and cannot do. Isn't that absurd? It's not only absurd, but it's also patriarchal, misogynistic, and transphobic to say the very least. Our society has imposed gender as a binary concept: black and white, masculine and feminine, man and woman. In a world that is so gray and filled with complexities and nuances with each and every situation, how can we accept a thing that we've created as something so simple and binary? Where does that leave the rest of us who do not fit in with these constructions? Are we invisible? Do we simply not exist? But the last time I checked, I'm right here, I'm right in front of you. Even binary identities are looked at in relative measurements of being a man. Less of a man, more of a man, not manly enough, too ladylike and feminine. And masculine qualities are always almost applauded, even when they border along the lines of narcissism. But feminine qualities are deemed unworthy and shameful, and very often as a burden that needs to be endured, possessed, passed on, and just pushed aside. We don't even own our own bodies or our identities. Why do we need our jobs, clothes, or even colors to have gender? I've come across so many men who still refuse to wear pink because they're scared that it makes them more feminine. Today, I want to go into the intricacies of this topic and my identity as a trans person in the contemporary music scene in India. This is by no means an entire guide or representation of the entire trans community. And it's also important to note that my experiences are definitely affected by my privileges as an able bodied, Savarna, fair skinned, upper middle class person. We should definitely remember that intersectionality is super real and very alive, and we should acknowledge that. I am non binary. This means that I'm neither a man nor a woman. My gender identity falls on a spectrum, and it's just not binary. There are binary trans people too, like trans men and trans women, and there are non-binary trans people like myself. The music scene in India that exists, and I would say pretty much globally as well, is very binary and heteronormative in its workings. There have been instances where cis men singers have been given the preference of pitch over cis women singers when it came to duets. This meant that the men got to set the pitch of the song, even if it meant that it was too high for the women. It has arguably set the precedent for the expectations we've had from female singers and how it almost seemed like higher the pitch, higher the talent. This in turn led to the isolation of gender non-conforming voices and a lack of opportunities for them in the wider commercial industries. And as with many sectors, there's also a pay gap here. What does it mean when I say that the industry is binary and heteronormative? In short, it means that the industry is not inclusive of gender diverse people. Work opportunities are created for and by cishet people, and therefore do not take other people into consideration. As an analogy, I think we can think of structures, even such as an office job or being a politician. Most of these were created for and by cis men. Power was held by them, and the structure created conformed to their needs and necessities. So this basically led to today, where some people argue that women who need maternity leave or menstruation leave are a liability on a company. I want us to question this kind of thinking. Why are we prisoners in structures created by our fellow humans? These are structures that are not natural. They didn't exist here when we came. We have made them. They're inherently selfish and favor those who are already privileged by the system. In the context of the music industry and trans musicians, these kinds of things manifest themselves as the lack of opportunities and a pay gap, a binary understanding of voice types, and transphobia as a whole. I'm going to go into talking about how my peers, other transgender musicians, and myself have been navigating such spaces. I started playing music professionally in 2016. I was heavily closeted out of an abusive relationship and back in Bangalore from 3 years after doing my undergraduate degree in Pune. I stayed closeted for the sanity of my family, but honestly, I was just going insane. I felt extremely isolated and alone. As a musician, I told myself that I couldn't be out and that I needed to fit in. It wasn't safe for me to be out, but I was also so afraid of my queerness being the focal point of my work and not my music itself. I didn't want to be the token queer musician. What I didn't realize was that this would stifle me from myself. It was getting harder to breathe with each passing day with this weight on my chest. I was unhappy because I wasn't living my truest life. I wanted to create art that was authentic to the real me, that was the truest form of what I was trying to say. Why did my queerness or transness need to suffer something that wasn't its fault? Eventually, I did a full 180, gradually and meticulously planned, but the more I turned, the happier I got. My privileges defined my experiences for sure. There were spaces that were more inclusive than others, but most of them still unaware of their covert trans or homophobia. Most spaces saw me as a tomboy, one of the guys, or just an edgy girl. This invalidation of my identity was also a result of a heteronormative, often male gaze. I'm given a certain kind of treatment with the presumption of what genitals I have. The songs I'm asked to sing, the comments I receive, and the unsolicited advice about how I should grow my hair. Um, it's a culture and society that is so violent towards abnormal identities that propagates this ownership of my body, my hair, and my identity. It's the structure is very fragile to say the least. My peers, who are also transgender indie musicians, often speak of similar experiences as well. Most of us are misgendered often. I often get called she, her, while my pronouns are they, them. And I think we need to understand that words have a lot of power, and gender dysphoria is often a devastating consequence of misgendering someone. An unnamed trans musician had someone hug him in the guise of appreciation, only to realize that he was hugged to be felt up to find out what his gender actually was. These seemingly harmless things isolate us more and more and are violent in their intent. Why are we so obsessed with genitals? Why is that the first thing we seem to think about when we think of trans bodies and identities? Why are our bodies up for public consumption? I have to be relentless in my pursuit of being recognized as a gender that I am. And it is exhausting for someone like me who have certain types of privileges. Can you imagine how heavy it must be for someone who doesn't have these privileges? For someone who cannot be out because they're under the danger of having their life being taken? How is it fair that they don't get to create art that is authentic to them, sing songs that they're meant to sing with their whole heart? Circling back to how we started this session, have you ever experienced or created a space that is truly inclusive of transgender people? I want to ask you to change this question to how can I create a space that is truly inclusive of trans and queer people? As someone with privilege, it was important for me to be out. I was determined to do so for myself and for my trans siblings who cannot be out right now. I create music that tells stories, and those stories are inherently queer and trans, as they are my experiences, which are queer and trans. The existing system needs to be dismantled. We need to create a space that is inclusive for us all and not just the norm. The norm should be to be inclusive of diverse identities. We need to take a good look at how we're understanding gender identities. In the context of the music industry, a simple start would be with introductions. Say your names and pronouns and ask the same of the other people too. This little gesture goes a long way in showing that your space is inclusive and respectful of all identities. You can even include your pronouns below your signature and your emails. If you're a gatekeeper of the industry, you could do your part by actively seeking out queer and trans musicians for opportunities. Introduce inclusion programs in your organizations where you hire trainees or interns who are queer and trans. Have your HR teams organize workshops for everyone to understand and empathize with queer and trans people. sensitize your staff. Question the existing norms and question why we assign gender to voices and things. We have a lot of unpacking to do internally, externally, and systemically, and that's okay. I know it can be scary to unlearn something that you've known your whole life. But remember how much of a difference you can make to someone's quality of life by being more introspective and considerate. I would like to leave you with one final question. Why is it so weird that I'm queer? Thank you. At this point, I'm going to start playing a song for you guys. I'm going to play an original song, and it's called 28. And the song is about not knowing when you're going to die. I'm not sure if you've heard of the 27 Club. Basically, it's a lot of famous musicians who died when they were 27 years old, like Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, and Jimi Hendrix. And the song kind of touches on the uncertainty of life. I don't know if I make it to 28. I have no clue. Fate was for me tonight, or the next 5 years, or any other day. I just know that we won't last together at all. So why don't we make the most of it right now? We'll do all the things that they said we shouldn't do. Our hearts in pieces, blood turned into blue. 'Cause all said and done, we don't have anything to prove. 'Cause I don't know if I make it to 28. But I know how much I want you right now. Ta-da-da-ta-da, ta-da-da-ta-da, ta-da-da-ta-da-da-da. Baby, please try to forgive me when I go, 'cause I can't hold you anymore. Baby, baby, please try to forgive